tough way to make a living.
Have you ever had any losses? What was your mindset coming out of like a loss? Was there anything
Ooh,
mentally
man.
that you had to overcome
Yeah.
that you vividly
This
remember?
is a good question. So my last loss was, I believe it was, I think it was 2017 or 18. I think it was 18, where I lost to Max Roshkoff. For the people who don't know who Max Roshkoff is, Max fought in the UFC. He fought Austin Hubbard on short notice and quit on the stool. So obviously he didn't fight in the UFC after that because he quit on the stool. He ended up fighting for Cage Warriors. I ended up being his first fight back from that fight. So the fight didn't go how I wanted it. And that was a tough one for me because I was like, if I beat this guy, then that does a lot for me. And it also proves to me like, hey, I deserve to be on that like kind of upper echelon with those upper echelon fighters that have fought in the UFC. So the fight didn't go my way. And I definitely thought I was kind of done. I was like, I don't know, man. Like, this shit is just tough, you know? And like when you take a loss like that, you're like, dude, like I don't know, man. So I went back to working a regular job, working construction. Took like a year off. And then Joe kept telling me, and it's funny, my wife kept telling me, they're like, you're not done. And I would say, I'm done. And they'd be like, no, you're not. They like play it off like a joke. Like, no, you're not. You're not gonna go out like that. My wife kept saying that. And then one day, just like, I was like, fuck this. Like, fuck my reality. Like, I'm gonna fight again. And then it just like, I rose, and then I was like, okay, I'm getting back in here and training and doing the right things. And then I just go on this crazy tear. Like, if it wasn't for Joe and my wife, probably wouldn't have happened. So I like thank them and hold them dear because like when you lose, yeah, it feels like obviously like your self value, definitely takes a hit, especially when you're trying to make this your living. Like this isn't just like, oh, I want to get some clicks on Instagram, I want to get some likes and some followers. Like, no, this is like my life. Like I love fighting, I love it with every ounce of my being. So like I want to be a world champ. I want to make a bunch of money fighting. And so when you lose a fight like that and you got people who count on you, yeah, you feel like shit, And it took a while to get up and dust myself off and realize like, oh, I'm not done. So I think everybody has to go through that. Everybody has to have like these like make or break moments. And that's one of those moments where like it was, yeah, like I'm the one who got up and made it happen afterwards, but it wasn't because of necessarily me right away. It was because other people were like, you're not done. And so it's just crazy. Like, surround yourself with good people who really support you and love you. Like, that you can lean on during times like that as a fighter because you're going to find them. There's only a couple guys that are undefeated in this sport. Like, you're probably going to lose at some point.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's
Crazy.
one of the benefits of having the sort of community that you guys have, like in gyms like this, just in general, like
Yeah.
across the country.
Right.
Because if you're just like some person that's on social media and stuff like that, there's not a lot of ways to interact with people
Right.
outside of the digital world these days, apart from like high school and then maybe if you go to college.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
But then at that point, you're going to college and now you're having to deal with politics and
Yeah.
different kinds of factors outside of just like a goal that you guys are going to that you're pushing each other to. You know?
Right.
There's a lot more things that can kind of seep in.
Yeah.
Versus like in here, it's just like, no, I want to be better and you better push me to be better too.
Right.
Or I'm gonna
Yeah.
expose you,
Yeah, exactly. And I think fighters know, like, especially ones that really care about this, you only need a couple guys around you that have the same vision. And it's sad to say, but there's usually one or two guys that kind of stand out and like push the rest of the group. That's like with any like great team or anything like that. Like Michael Jordan was that guy for the Bulls, and all of them talk about it. Like Pittman, all of the guys who played on that team, like they were great during that team was great. But like after they all split, you kind of got to see like Jordan kind of did his thing still, but everybody else kind of like slowly like just like the value of play was different, So I think it's one of those things like you got to be a leader and you got to lead by example. And fighters who really care about this stuff, they lead from a point of like leading by example, but then also when things are bad, like like they know how to they know how it feels to lose. Like when for instance, like when Trevor lost his last fight, like I know what that fight like could have done for him or meant to him. So like I could relate to that in some way. And not necessarily got to go over there and put my arm around him and tell him I love him, but it's just like, hey, I'm here. Like whatever you need. Like that goes a long way. And a lot of people run to you and want to be your best friend when you're up, but then when things are down and you're sitting there in a locker room by yourself, bloody, with half your money, you're like, well, fuck, So like the real ones kind of stay and help out, and the ones that showed up for the fight but aren't there in the locker room, then they're going about their life.
Yeah.
So that part of it's kind of like a sour part of the sport.
Yeah.
Like
I think also too, like the word follower kind of has a negative connotation to it,
yeah,
But like in that scenario, like where you have somebody that's like leading a practice like that, it's like, oh, like if you're in that kind of scenario where somebody's a leader, you should be thinking to yourself, like, why do they care more about what happens to me than I do?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's probably the benefit of like what we're saying with the whole Michael Jordan thing was he was the force of confrontation in the locker room constantly.
Yep.
But at least the people that he was with knew, like, this isn't at me.
Yeah. This is for me.
He's not
this
talking.
Is for us.
This is for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that's lost today too, is where there's so many people that take criticism
personally.
as like super personally.
Yeah. It's because people don't have thick skin. It's like back then, like, yeah, like maybe you didn't like what Michael was saying in the locker room, but damn, man, you had to respect it because the dude showed up every practice and every game and showed out. And it's like he held everybody to a standard. And that's like any captain or leader in anything, it doesn't even have to be fighting. Like they hold people to a certain standard and they don't accept anything less. And that's how things really get done.
And he held himself to the same standard too. That's a big
and
thing.
Was willing to show it.
Yeah.
Like
I think that flu game in the playoffs, you ever remember that?
No, it was.
He had 102 fever.
I do
played
remember.
the game, got like 30 something points.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy.
Out of it, migraine. Like
he's like, I don't care.
He's on the bench with a towel over his face, like when he wasn't on the floor.
Yeah,
like
that's crazy, and that's just a guy.
And you got to stick to it.
Yeah, and that's how things really get done. It's like people think in today's world, people think like, oh, we need to have open communication and we need to communicate. And yeah, communication is important to getting certain things done. But really, you need a guy who's gonna just be like, I don't give a fuck sometimes about what you say. This is how it's getting done. And like that's the guy I'm like, all right. Like it doesn't have to be with everything you do, because I think there's a time and place for how to lead people. But sometimes it's like, I don't give a fuck what you say. This is what we're gonna do. Here's the game plan. This is what we're doing. And usually when there's somebody who takes that initiative, people follow.
Yeah.
And when they see that that guy's confident and he's like, no, we're doing this, people will usually follow.
And I feel like a lot of the communication in that scenario, like I feel like people love talking about how they feel.
Yeah. Oh, that's what all of today's age is all about. But like
at least for me, like I don't feel like all of the feelings that I have are valid. And I think it's a stupid idea to be like, oh, this is my truth. Like this is what I feel. So there's some beliefs that you're gonna hold in your life that just need to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you attach your personality to that so much, like you're gonna fold when you lose that bit of it of yourself.
Well, if you enact on every single emotion you had, you would be all over the place. You know what I mean?
You'd be in jail.
Yeah, you'd be in jail. You would just be like you wouldn't be we wouldn't be a functioning society. And that's kind of what society's kind of turned into, is people just enacting on their emotions and like very entitled to their self-emotions. And it's like, dude, some emotions you need to like dissolve within yourself, like you said, and like deal with them yourself versus telling everybody and then enacting in some crazy way on them. And it's like back to like telling people, what is it? What am I trying to say? It was when you're telling people like, hey, you can do this better or that better, like the self or criticism, like people just take it way too personally. And like you should hear the person out, and then even if you don't necessarily like it, or maybe initially you don't even agree with it, but then you can take time to look at it and be like, oh, okay, or even ask them like, why exactly are you saying what you're saying? Like, why do you think I'm not doing this to my best ability? For what reason? And maybe they give you a really valid reason that you didn't think of.
Yeah.
So
I think a good example of that is, do you ever see that podcast with Joe Rogan with Brendan Schaub when he was telling him to quit later in his career?
That was a tough one.
Some people think like, oh, that's rude. Like, you should just let him do. But
That's a good friend, man.
I think one thing Rogan really pointed out, which we kind of learned later on after seeing how Brendan Schaub's career has gone, he could see some things in him that he knew, okay, there's some careers that you can take after this, whether it be comedy, whether it be podcasting, that can be just as lucrative as what you're doing before.
Yeah.
And you're not living up to the same situations that in fighting that you were when you were a little bit younger.
Right.
So the chance that you might incur more damage that might affect those things that you have going for you later on in life don't make it worth it.
Right. Right.
Of course, he probably could have fought another 3 or 4 fights.
But man, some of the and
what are you getting from that?
What are you getting from that? And Brendan Schaub's career. I watched him back when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, so like he's one of those guys I watched growing up, and very, very big highs and very big lows. Yeah. Like he was either starching dudes or he was getting starched. Like that's tough. And when I watched that podcast, I think Joe got a lot of shit from people because it's like, who are you, Joe? But it's like, hold on, Joe's a good friend for one, and two, he's just being honest, and he's been around the game. So his opinion has to be, somewhat valid or at least listened to.
Yeah.
So, if it's just some nobody who's never been in the fight game, knows nothing about it, and he's like, you should just stop and do this. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, But him and Joe have had that relationship. He's been on multiple episodes of that podcast. And then Joe's been around the game for so long, and he's just giving him his honest critique.
I think if you asked him now, he's happy that he told him that.
Yeah, agreed.
Even though he was most definitely not happy that he did it on a podcast.
Yeah, in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
It's like one of those conversations that you would like to have like behind closed doors, but it happened on such a big platform that like other people could learn from it,
Yeah.
And that's big. That's bigger than just me and my friend having a conversation behind closed doors. I think a lot of people could take away from that interaction.
I think that's the benefit of podcasts, though.
Yeah.
Is like, we're filming this and we set up cameras, but we didn't set up cameras for this exact situation that we're going through right now.
Right.
Versus like you see like short clips on like social media where it's like Instagram and it's like somebody films like somebody crying or something or like themselves. They set that camera up to do that. Yeah. And there's some kind of weird connotation that has versus like, we didn't plan to talk about any of the stuff we're talking about right now. This is just where it went.
Yeah.
And I think people understand that, and that's one of the reasons why they like podcasts so much.
Right. Yeah. Because I think they like the organic.
Yeah.
It's just the organic. Like, we didn't plan on having any of this conversation after our segment about Pride 33. It just happened, Like, I think nowadays people are looking so much for that notoriety and the clicks and the likes and the followers that they're willing to set up a camera and put on an entire performance for people. And what does that say about them, and our society?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Your life isn't real.
Yeah. It's like an act.
It's like Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, dude. It's like literally Hollywood. Like now, like Hollywood's getting what they want. Like people are acting like their life's Hollywood at home. Like legitimately. Like they're literally planning out what I got to post today? What I got to do this today? Like how can I get more likes? How can I get more follows? And it's like, if you have to go to that extreme to do that, to feel whatever you feel like you're going to get out of it, then I feel bad for you, quite honestly. Like
I feel bad for myself.
Yeah, you're living like a shallow existence. Like you should be doing cool things that you love to do, where you can put out content like when you want to do it and still get that notoriety from people.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not as many people that you want or as many likes as you want, but at least it's organic. It's what you want to do. It's not like, oh, I got to go do this because I want this, and
Yeah.